first and foremost, congratulations on winning the Fresh Start Award. I was so happy to see that you were one of the recipients. Congratulations. How does it feel?
Well, to be honest, it's been hard to process. I'm sure we'll talk about that, but it's really been hard to process. It was such a challenge to go through the application phase and the interview phase and all of the bits and pieces that went with it. I laughingly said while we were going through the process that perhaps the stress that it causes to people who have had or currently still have mental health problems was a little bit too much to endure. But it was worth it in the end, and I am extremely thankful to be one of the 10 who got the inaugural award, and thankful to you because most people wouldn't know this, but I asked Casey to write one of my recommendations, and it was surprisingly beautiful. I guess that was your good turn for that day. You must have done it first thing in the morning.
Exactly. Yeah, got it done out of the way. Yeah, and you also got a letter of recommendation from Dr. Tro himself, correct?
Yes, I did. Yes.
Ah,
So we have worked together several times. He used to be my doctor, and I was like, let me see if I could throw this out there. And, he was my doctor when I did have a relapse into depression, and he really understands the story. And we really learned a lot from that process for each other. Like I found out later how much he learned from me for going through that process, and I definitely learned a lot through going through that process with him. So yeah, I was just like, let me throw this out there, and he very generously wrote me a recommendation as well. So I'm very grateful for that too.
that's amazing. I think a letter of recommendation from Dr. Tro is weighted slightly a little heavier than from a bum like me. Um, so I'm very glad you're able to get that. And I know how much work you've done, and I know what your passion is like in this world. And so that $10,000 is going to go very, very far. I've made it my mission to try to interview all 10 of the winners. It's been really fun to get to know some of the other people that I was not aware of and hear their stories and ask them, what they're planning on doing with the money. And yeah, it sounds like this is going to be something amazing, and it's going to create a lot more attention around this. And like I said, I think that all of you will be very resourceful with the $10,000, and it will go very, very far. So again, congratulations on that. We're going to talk more about that later on in the conversation. As I mentioned in the introduction, we interviewed you in episode 469. It's been quite a while. We've had you on other times. We kind of did the episode where, I met you at Low Carb Denver 2023. We did the episode this summer where we reviewed the Symposium for Metabolic Health with Janet, which was really amazing. We're going to be hosting her pretty soon. But if you could, can you remind us how it was that you were able to find yourself in this world to begin with?
Sure. So back in 2017, I was turning 40, and I went to my doctor to just have routine checkup. And he was like, well, since you're turning 40, we're going to run some blood work. And when he did that, he was like, oh, your cholesterol levels are not looking so great. So why don't you come back in? We'll talk about your options. And the options were to get put on a statin. At the time, I was already on a lot of medications because I was already diagnosed as bipolar. And so I was on antipsychotics and antidepressants. And I was like, I really just don't want to add something else. And I did have a little nugget of information because my husband, Matt, listened to Vinnie Tortorich's podcast. So we kind of knew that perhaps statins weren't going to be the best therapeutic option anyway, that I could probably change it with diet. So I asked my doctor if I could have, I asked him for 6 months to change my diet, which he granted, which I'm really thankful for. If he hadn't granted that, I might be on all kinds of medications right now. Who knows? But after that 6 months checkup, the cholesterol numbers that he was looking at had gone down, and I had lost probably 45 pounds at the time, and life was feeling pretty grand. So I stumbled upon how this would affect my mental health. It was a complete aside. I also consider the weight loss an aside. The goal was to not have to get put on a statin, and I accomplished that goal. But all of these other things started happening that felt so good that I just continued to do it. There was no reason not to. The food's delicious. I felt great. I was moving a lot more. I had lost weight. All of these great things happened. At the same time, it's really when this metabolic psychiatry movement started getting some traction. I know I've listened to Dr. Eid a couple times say that everybody was practicing in their silos, in their own little worlds, and that finally just started coming together, and they started going on to podcasts, and I was listening, and I was like, maybe this is helping me. So it turns out that my husband was laid off of his job, and we ended up having to move from South Carolina to Texas. And after we made that move, I kind of reflected on it and I was like, huh, I did that. I wasn't curled up in a ball. I wasn't crying every day. I wasn't avoiding anything. I was facing this huge task of uprooting my family and moving halfway across the country, and it didn't set me back. I was excited. I was ready to try new things. I just like simple stuff like going outside and watching the sunrise, and then in the evening going back outside to watch the sunset. These things were things that were not part of my world prior to eating this way. And that's when I realized that, yeah, this is probably helping. And I asked yet another general practitioner if it would be okay to titrate off of the medications that I was on, and she agreed. Another very wild thing for someone to do, a doctor to do, is to agree to that. And that was what we did. We titrated off the medicines. So that was like a year and a half later, so closer to 2019. Well, I was finished titrating off of my medications by in 2019, and I have not gone on any other mental health medications since.
That's amazing. Wow. Okay. So talking about the statin, I wouldn't think that that would be the one. You know what I mean? Like you have a history of taking lots of different medications, very powerful medications as well, which I want to talk to you about. But it was the statin that would just seem like, okay, I'm already taking this other stuff. This is like Tylenol at this point. Like, what was it about the statin? Did you learn directly from Vinny that these things could be harmful or maybe not that effective? Like, what did you know? Did you know anything about the side effects that come along with statins and mental health?
I didn't know. But because I listened to his podcast and he has these luminaries come on his Friday show, I was getting that information. I was starting to understand that statins aren't what they're telling us that they are. And I can't even remember necessarily who was talking in one of his interviews. It was just that I just had this little tiny nugget of information that this is probably just not something that's really going to be beneficial in the long run. And so maybe it's something I should try to avoid. I don't need anything else. It was already hard enough. My medications, I was sedated when I was on my medications. So remembering to do stuff was just nearly impossible. I didn't want to have to remember to do another thing, and figured it was worth a try. Let's just give this a try and see how it goes. And, the rest is history.
Wow. Did you ever see the video on YouTube that's titled something like "Statins Made Me Stupid"? Something like
No,
that.
no, I haven't, but
Oh
I can
goodness.
believe it.
Yeah, this dude is told by his doctor that he needs to take a statin. I think he's in his 50s or 60s, and he's taking a pretty small dose, and he's fully in. Like he believes what he's doing is right because his doctor tells him. But he's talking also about the mental issues that he's having and forgetting everything, and that has lost the ability to play like simple games with his family. Like that would have been horrible on a brain that was already compromised at the time and already had been medicated for so long. It's a really good thing that you decided to do what you did.
Yeah, things happen for a reason. I firmly believe that things happen for a reason, and this just happened.
Yeah.
And I'm very grateful.